Welcome to the Happy 365 podcast, the show where we unpack hot topics, employment law and coaching and company wellbeing. And we ask, how can we have shiny, happy people? I'm Louise Otton, the Executive Performance and Wellbeing Coach at Law 365.
I'm Megan O'Hara. I'm the partner in employment law at Law 365.
And I'm Elliot Burton, and I'm the Paralegal here at Law 365.
This is the first episode of our new series.
Yeah, we are really excited to be here today. We're really excited to release this new series of podcast episodes, and we're going to tell you a little story about how Megan and I came to creating the Happy 365 journey.
Yeah. So the three of us work at Law 365, and it specialises in the needs of Microsoft partners. We do commercial contracts, we do hiring and managing staff, we do coaching, we do performance management, and our mission is to help Microsoft partners grow with less risk.
And in this first episode, we're going to be exploring what it is are the greatest challenges that Microsoft partners are facing right now. And we've really delved into this by looking at three hot topics that we think are most important right now. One is the Great Resignation, which is a term I'm sure lots of people have heard about, and the war on talent. We're going to be looking at some of the research we've done into Microsoft partners and the challenges they're facing. And then we're going to be looking at why wellbeing is the number one priority for employees in the workplace. Yeah. So let's jump in, shall we?
Yep, brilliant.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
So the Great Resignation and the war on talent and all of these words that we're noticing, what do we think's been happening in the world over the last sort of 18 months?
Yeah, I suppose we're coming to the end of 2022 now. What have we seen with our clients and customers?
Well, there's been the whole remote working thing, isn't there? So
absolutely.
The big kind of, shall we get everyone back in the office? And it started off, it was quite tentative, wasn't it? Then there was some firms that were kind of trying to be really quite firm and actually reducing pay, weren't they, as well, if you didn't come back to the office. So it's been quite tricky, really, quite a lot of tricky issues, I think.
Exactly. And the other thing I've seen is that redundancies are like picking up this year, especially around the beginning of the year, and that was a total change from the year before when everyone was trying to onboard people as quickly as they could. Now we're also coming into the cost of living crisis as well, so that's having a play. We've seen some grievances come up this year
we have
in
the employment department.
Which, I mean, I'm quite new, I'm quite green behind the ears, but I'd never seen that sort of thing before. So there's definitely rumblings under the surfaces. But
And it's hard to put your finger on what the exact cause is, but what we're seeing as well is a lot of slightly odd behaviour in around people, what has been termed quiet quitting. So people are feeling a little bit disengaged in the workplace, potentially because the hybrid world has meant that people are less connected. We know that attrition rates are really much higher than they used to be in the tech sector. People are looking to move, and if they're not engaged at work as much as they perhaps were, they're starting to think about moving and looking for other opportunities. And we're seeing this sort of slightly quiet sort of behaviour of people moving on without there being a real issue. There's not a performance issue. There's not like an issue from the organisation side. But we're just noticing this is starting to have a shift, and people are less loyal to organisations because they've got less of that connection when they go into the office every day. I was just wondering, is that something, do you think you guys are seeing that as well?
So what do we mean when you said quiet quitting? What is quiet quitting? Is that handing in your notice, really, like a little mouse?
Little quiet game. Put it on the desk and run away.
I'd like to leave, please.
What do we mean by quiet quitting?
Well, I think it's people are gradually sort of feeling like they're not as bought into perhaps what they're doing. They know that it's easy to get a new job, like it's an employee's market at the moment. So they potentially start to just take a bit of a step back, maybe are less as engaged as they were, and maybe they're starting to sort of survey the scene, see what else is out there.
See what's out there, exactly.
Point.
So there's other options.
And also I think there's an issue of, not an issue, but like people are much more aware of how they want to live their life and work. So wellbeing is really important, so especially to the younger generation. They are less tolerant of high stress environments. So if they are in an environment where that's happening, are they potentially thinking that that's not what they want to be in, and therefore deciding to quietly decide to do something else, set up their own company, move elsewhere? There's all sorts. I mean, it's like a complex web of reasons.
And I think the generational thing as well, in the sense that people are quite willing, they're not kind of set in a place, location, they're not, as you said about the loyalty point, isn't it, not set in, I've got to stay with this company, I've got to stay in this place. It's a lot of, it's not mobility, is it? It's just a lot of movement and a lot of flexibility and a lot of kind of quite relaxed about it, whereas, you know, certainly my dad and you know, in a job for 20 years in the same place for 10 years, you know, location wise, you know, the movement just wasn't there.
Well, then I suppose that means we've got to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the pandemic. Everyone now, after we've been in lockdown, we know that we want to spend more time at home. We want to go to the parks more like we did during lockdown. We want maybe new careers. I mean, I myself have had a complete career change, and I think we're definitely seeing people wanting that a bit more. I mean, even within our own company, we're seeing people moving who want to go maybe try a new job. Who want other benefits or different work balance, work-life balance, that sort of thing.
Definitely. And it's throwing up these awkward conversations. So I've stolen that term from the amazing Brené Brown, but she was talking about how this is it the great awkward rather than the great resignation, as a fallout from COVID and the pandemic and everything that's come off the back of that around how people work and how people choosing how to work, how are organisations matching that with getting people back to the office, but as well as giving them flexibility. And everybody's got different needs, haven't they? So it is really awkward for companies to know and get the balance right. We've seen some of the big organisations demand people back in the office, and there's been uproar.
Exactly. Kicked off on LinkedIn, didn't it, with the how can you do this, because it wasn't, you know. And I think that's pulled back again. I think there was a push back to the office, and it's kind of died back. But I can feel that potentially coming back again. That there's going to be again a kind of, we want people back in the office, because we've talked about connections, haven't we? It's if you come back in the office, you kind of get that collaboration, and you get that. It's the 2D versus 3D, isn't it? It's all very well on the video seeing. It's much better than on the phone seeing people, but it's just not the same. If you're not in person, you just get that better kind of vibe and feel. If you can actually meet in the office at least once in a while, you know.
Exactly. And I suppose as the economy is kind of like, you know, going down the toilet a little bit, maybe people will start to blame people working at home for productivity going down, and then as a sort of reaction to that, they suddenly bring everyone back into the office, which might cause a stir with everyone's getting used to these new terms that they're working by.
And that's actually where the cost. That's another good point actually. With the cost of living pressures coming back in the office, people are used to not having the petrol cost, not having the train costs. And then if you're suddenly back in the office 5 days a week, whatever, you know, more than that's another extra cost on top of all the other costs that you've already got.
Lost that people now associate with being able to do at home. So is productivity better or worse at home? It's a never-ending, you know, question, isn't it? Really, but how do we help people have those good conversations with their staff and their organisations to get it right for them? And I think that's the challenge we're seeing in lots of our clients. They're not necessarily, you know, the big corporates that we're talking about, but you know, if you've got 100 people and you're all remote, how do you make sure you get enough of that really good meaningful connection, you know, once a week or whatever it might be, twice a week, twice a month? How do you make sure that people are feeling like that so that they stay loyal to the company, so that they are more likely to commit and engage and work in a way that we want them to?
Because that's the other as well. Premises, people have got rid of their premises, haven't they, along the kind of last couple of years. So in terms of bringing everyone back in the office, depending on your size, you might not have the premises, or you might have smaller premises, or that's another kind of, well, it's a cost as well, isn't it? It's a cost implication. But it's also, do you have that availability for everyone to come in, or you know, do you need to rotate people, or it's interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm definitely noticing with the people we're, you know, connected with and who we're working with, it is the hot topic at the moment. How do we make the office an attractive place to be? How do you get people to come in when it's going to be meaningful and collaborative, not just because they should be in? And what does it mean for people's wellbeing levels? People do want connection, but not everybody wants the same kind of connection. And it's opened up a whole can of worms of, you know, different generations, different dynamics, and the, you know, different, you know, people who've got caring responsibilities at home perhaps don't have the flexibility to have an evening social life, whereas perhaps people who haven't got that would rather have an evening. So it's really tricky to get it right.
Finding that balance.
But it's really, really important to everybody's happiness at work, which is what we're here to hopefully help solve some of the problems for.
Exactly. All of this is where we've sort of started from, isn't it? All these questions.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, exactly. The resignation and then attracting, because it's the big circle, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's you lose people, you want people in, but the tech sector is really struggling in the attracting staff and the attrition rates and people leaving. It's kind of, I don't know what the percentages are on it, but the stats are pretty
it's pretty
high for.
It's between about 13 and 18% in the tech sector, which is the highest industry. Yeah, for attrition, and it's increased over the pandemic. And actually, from the research we did last year with Microsoft partners, I think we found that most people had found their attrition rates had gone up. So because of the pandemic, or maybe not because of it, we can't necessarily directly attribute it to that, but it has risen because people are moving around more. And one of the things with the tech sector is you've got big teams of service desks, so you need people in a physical location. Yeah. So how do you make that whole flexible hybrid model work for those particular teams? It's a really complicated solution to come up with, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of also, I think that one of the things that's coming up in the employment world as well is around kind of you build up your staff and they've got such good technical expertise, you don't want to lose them. And it's you have your restrictive covenants maybe in place to try and kind of keep people. You can't keep people. People want to move on, and they want to move on, don't they? It's and that is just more common. But yeah, I think tech expertise is kind of in high demand. Demand.
And they know, employees know that they can quite easily move around. In fact, I think we found some piece of research said that almost 7 in 10 employees, so 69% of employees, are pretty confident that they could move jobs within the next month.
Wow.
And I think there was something around, 24% of employees are always thinking about moving.
That's mad, isn't it?
You've got to constantly stay on top of that desire to keep them bought into what you're doing and connected to the, we could talk about this in future episodes, but connected to the purpose of why they're at work and what are they passionate about and how motivated are they. And there's such a, it goes deeper than just giving them a better salary or giving them a home working environment, doesn't it?
Yeah. There's lots of elements to it, aren't there? Lots of different things, which is, I think some of this came out in the survey, didn't it? That we did with the CEOs of Microsoft partners. So it's a lot. As an employer, I just think it's such a lot. You've got to be balancing all the time, isn't there?
Yeah, you can understand why they call it a war on talent. There's so many logistics involved. And also, like what you were saying before, it seems like all the cards are almost in the employee's hands to dictate the hours they work, how much they get paid, the benefits they're going to have, where they work. I mean, it's a good time to be an employee. It might not be so easy to keep the good talent in though if you're the employer.
Yeah.
It's like a revolution, a good revolution, I think, in lots of ways. Like we've gone from really traditional ways of working, haven't we? Especially in corporate professional services, the old-fashioned legal model that at Law 65 we've completely, turned on its head. We don't encourage that behaviour now, do we, at all? But how do we get back to being somewhere a little bit more in balance with what's actually going to be really beneficial in a company? So we need people to work and we need people to give as much as they can and to be happy and to be motivated and well rewarded. Yeah. So there's a lot of things we've got to get right in that process.
Where do we start?
Where do we start? Exactly. Well, should we have a look at the research?
Yeah. We conducted a big piece of research for the third year running with our Microsoft partner clients, along with Coeo and also Incredible Results, who helped us pull all the data together and interviewed our clients, which you guys can download from our website.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's a really fascinating piece of research. But I guess we could just talk about the main findings that we sort of took away from the research, which was backing onto what we've just talked about around the tech industry being probably having the highest attrition rates, understanding that what our clients are looking for is this answers to these challenges we're seeing around flexible working, hybrid working. How do we get people to be more bought into the company? What are the kind of main things you guys have noticed from our research then? Anything in particular jumped out?
I was just wondering what kind of research was undertaken. So what sort of things were asked of people?
Good question. So it's things like, what are they noticing around getting people back to the office?
Okay.
They were asked around what were their recruitment challenges, what were their attrition rates like. Salaries, yeah, definitely. There was a big chapter around diversity and inclusion, so making sure that they are paying attention to that. And then looking at what people do to give recognition, which is a big piece of what motivates people at work, isn't it? Yeah. So I think we probably just need to delve into some of those topics. I think the most interesting one was the attrition and recruitment one. So looking again at the fact that we found that 32% of people have changed jobs in the last year, which is a lot. If you think about that.
That's
in a small
super
company,
high, isn't it? Yeah.
And that goes right back to what we were saying before, our discussions before about how this war on talent's happening. We're seeing, 32%?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So that could be, if it was 100 people, 33 people.
Potentially.
Yeah. And then to bring the company then back up to speed. If you've not got someone ready to slip straight into that job, you've got a whole big gap, haven't you, that you're constantly trying to fill and make sure you can service your clients, and you've got the right expertise in. It's really, really tricky, isn't it? Really tricky.
And that has a knock-on effect on so many things. It has a knock-on effect on profit, because it costs, we know it costs about up to 2 times someone's salary when they leave. Yeah. So to replace them, you've got to recruit them, you've got to onboard them, you lose time and knowledge. So there's a huge complex of cost associated with losing somebody, not just the fact that they've gone. And then the effect on culture. Imagine if you lose 30% of your workforce in a year. That's a big chunk of like knowledge and know-how and just people's ways of being together. And that doesn't come back quickly. No,
it takes it's kind of an organically slow grow back to kind of feeling more like a team. There's a big hole in the team, and it just I think that's quite tough, as you say, on the culture and the cost. Big impact, isn't it? And people, and I would imagine productivity effectively, because people are maybe a bit demotivated because someone's left, and then they don't they're maybe not as or they're used to the support from that person. There's lots of different impacts, isn't there?
So these people that are leaving, are they, I would imagine that they're mostly going to other Microsoft partners, and they're sort of jumping around, almost like we said before, almost like playing the field to see, I'll work there for a little bit. They've got good hours. I suppose it could be that kind of thing.
Yeah, true. Or they could be going as consultants, or trying it on their own. Maybe trying, as in trying to set up a company themselves. But I think consultancy is quite a big thing in the Microsoft industry as well, isn't it?
And if we look at like, because you can look at the reasons why people leave from an employee point of view in terms of what they're going to. So it might be new experience, better pay, better working conditions, whatever it might be. But there's also quite a lot of reasons we've found from our research that are a bit deeper than that go deeper than just that kind of surface level. So it can be things like lack of recognition at work. It might be that their manager hasn't done a good job of managing them for some reason. Lack of trust, lack of being bought into the purpose of the business. Do they really know why they come to work? And as well as obviously things like work-life balance, working hours, compensation. But we've seen that one of the biggest reasons people leave now is well-being. So they want to work in a place where their well-being is valued and paid attention to, and that's what they're actually looking, that's what people are really looking for. It's the number one reason people join a company, is because they believe that their well-being is going to be attended to. And that's not just fluffy stuff. It's not like fruit on the table and a gym membership. This is around good connections, good career progression, obviously good well-being opportunities around health, but more around having those really strong relationships with people and really good management and leadership. That's what ultimately makes people feel good at work, I think. So it's interesting to see how there's just more information now around all of this. Since the pandemic, hence that tricky word, the pandemic. But people are talking about it.
Talking about it more, aren't
they?
More
open, aren't they, around this?
In fact, even the work we're doing with Microsoft partners will help them with HR policies, things like that. And some are around stress and mental well-being at work.
True.
Others about ED&I, equality, diversity and inclusion, that sort of thing. And I think we've done quite a few of them this year.
We have. It's much more of interest to employers, isn't it? Because employees are talking about it, then in turn employers kind of think, we need to kind of focus in on that. We need to do something about that. And as you say, they might look at coaching, they might look at getting some employment policies to kind of basically rubber stamp. We are interested in this. Look, they may be interested in it and be trying to look after it, but it's kind of the backing paperwork and then backing it up with maybe some coaching to make sure they're looking after their employees. So they're actually been acting on it, haven't they, this year and last year as well? Definitely showing more interest in kind of demonstrating it as well. By the kind of policies they put in place. It is really interesting.
What have been the kind of most sort of modern, is that the right word, policies and sort of work you've done for our clients that's really supporting them in this space this year?
Yeah, well we've done some transgender policy.
Gender identity policies, that sort of thing, which is, I imagine that lots of employers have never even heard of having such a policy. That could be so inclusive and just welcome people of all genders.
Well, we've been doing quite a lot of enhancements around the family leave policy as well, haven't we? So the employers have been looking at, how can we, it's partly to do with, attracting, the candidates come on board, they're interested in coming on board, say, but what do you do for family leave? Do you do enhanced leave, enhanced pay? And so then again, in turn, the employers are triggered to think, what's the competition doing out there? What are they providing? And should we, provide some enhancements? What do people do? So enhancing the kind of pay, and that's the kind of things you've been doing as well, haven't you?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. But there's equality, diversity, transgender, gender identity.
That was the other one. So some employers had never heard of a menopause policy.
Oh, that was it. Yeah.
And some people thought, oh wow, you do a menopause policy? That is so. But that's it. People want to be inclusive. They want to be understanding, have a bit more empathy towards the people that they work with.
Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting one, isn't it? I think even in Law 365, we did a menopause workshop nearly 2 years ago now, didn't we? Before the kind of, it feels like it's really taken off in this space and people are paying much more attention to it. But, if you can just show your employees that you care about things that are happening to them outside of work and you're going to support them as much as you can, it makes such a difference. You're going to have people who think, oh wow, they actually genuinely believe that this is something that's going to be important to me. And opening up these conversations so that it's not this stigma around somebody having to suffer in silence. We've gone along, talking about mental well-being and mental health has definitely moved on so much in the last
massively,
few
isn't it?
years. But there's just so much more work to do around that, isn't there? But I think we're really demonstrating to our clients that if you can do this and we role model it, and it's showing, the benefits are showing in how our employees, talk about these things at work, it's really going to help kind of lead the way, which is ultimately what we're trying to do, is to change break down the stigma, change ways of working, and create happier organisations.
So you need to be a more rounded employer, effectively, don't you? You're kind of, your offerings need to be rounded, and as you go along, what do we do? Was it last year or the year before we did this time, because it was November, wasn't it? We did we had the chap come and talk to us about men's health.
That's right.
Which was really interesting. All those little bits, you add them all together and it makes you an interesting employer. It makes people feel that they'll be comfortable when they come to you. Oh, that's because people, that's what they do, candidates do, don't they? Before they come, they look on your social media, see what kind of things you do, and if you're the right employer for them. So it's not, as you say, increased compensation is one of the reasons, 52%, that's why people move, but they look at the whole picture. It's a whole kind of interest in what is this employer, what do they represent, what might they do, how will they support me. It's quite a big decision, even though we're saying people move quickly, they kind of think, do their research, and they're quite interested in getting the whole picture of the employer before they move.
Absolutely. And then I think a big thing for our clients and for Microsoft partners is to think one step further, which is to do all of those things and then measure it. Like, how do you then check that that's actually working?
That's a good point.
So one of the big challenges a lot of organisations have is, well, it's great we can provide all this, but actually how do we measure that it's having an impact? And one of the things we suggest often is, do some sort of employee engagement survey, interview people, really check in and see how they're feeling, have coaching conversations. Don't wait for a coach to do that for you, but as leaders, can they set themselves up so they're having really good conversations with their people so that they're challenging the norms. So it's just continue thinking about, are we getting the feedback we need around these things? Because otherwise they become a nice to have that don't necessarily
what are they
move
actually
things.
Yeah, exactly. What is it actually achieving? There's no point doing something if people don't feel they're benefiting from it. Because what we were saying earlier, wasn't it, about the employee-employer, what was that? The kind of mismatch. And I think they could be, as well as the mismatch on thinking about employer-employee well-being, so the employers think employees are really doing really well, and in actual fact that's not the case. It's the same with the benefits, isn't it? Employers put these benefits, do these different things and think that it's going to be really valuable, but if you don't measure it, is it really valuable? Are the employees really valuing it? Maybe they're not. So you're absolutely right. You've always got to be measuring what you're doing as to whether it's adding value, being found beneficial.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I did see somewhere in the notes that said that that benefits might not be the number one thing that they're after, that the employers are saying, no, it's just money. It just comes back to money. People just want cash.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think, yes, that's important. Absolutely. You've got to get the fundamentals right and the basic compensation right, and it's got to be clear about how you can achieve more. What are the financial rewards and how do you achieve them? That is important, but you need to also have a really clear sense of progression opportunities, and people need to be able to work in a way that they feel they have some control over it. So this kind of idea of autonomy, we'll be talking about that in future episodes, but they absolutely need to have a sense of control over how they want to work, how they want to develop. Can they make suggestions? Can they work in a safe way, like psychologically safe way? We talk about a lot of people being free to speak up and share ideas and not be scared of failing. So you need both parts, absolutely.
Yes.
You can't have, I don't think one can be ignored at the expense of the other. Yeah. But if you get, we were talking about this the other day actually with somebody, if you can get the basic compensation package right, then you can layer on top that purpose and that motivation and that progression piece really well. Because if you haven't got the first bit right, it's going to be much harder for people to feel, well, if I can't pay my energy bills this month, do I really care about whether I'm connected to,
Exactly, that becomes less important, doesn't it? Yeah. You've got to get the pay right as a starting point, and then add on and move around it and against that whole employer picture, isn't it? Yeah. But with the cost of living crisis, that's really, really important for people.
Maybe that's a pitfall that we're seeing in the research that sort of says they're just going to try and throw money at it and hope it fixes some of these problems. Whereas, as you said, it's not as simple as that. And also, people don't, as you said, people don't have that kind of cash. Yeah. So what can they do?
Yeah, that's true. The MSP, exactly. Employers can't necessarily pay and keep paying because and meeting all the demands. So it's what else can we offer? What is what else will make us a good employer? And make us an attractive proposition for someone to come and move and come and work with us.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that ties back to this whole piece around what people are looking for, which is good sense of well-being. Are they? And I think well-being gets given a bit of a fluffy status around it, and it's a much bigger topic than that. This is about everything we've just been talking about around progression and having control and having a great boss and having great connections at work, and having good work-life balance. But that's just one piece of the pie. Yeah, this is a big happiness pie. That's got lots of slices in it. And then we know if that's all attended to. So Gallup did a survey this year, and they found that organisations that have really highly engaged staff have 23% increase on their profits. So obviously there's lots that goes into that, but that engagement piece, which comes from people feeling like they're cared for, actually is good for business. So then they can increase their profits, and then they can pay them more. So
it's a great kind of circle of improvement. And talking of well-being, we haven't talked about our H in our happy, have we? And how that links in. In terms of, we've got our building block, haven't we? Our kind of foundations to our happy 365 is health, well-being. It's so important. Important starting point, and then you build up around there with all the other bits we've been talking about: connections, which is our why.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just as you say, big pie, lots of happiness, slices of made up of lots of different things.
Yeah.
And it's actually that it's common. You think, well, everyone wants something slightly different, and yes, everyone does, but there are lots of common themes of what people are looking for, aren't there? Maybe slightly different variations of it. Talking about how many days in the office. Some people would like 3 days in the office because they really like people and they kind of thrive from seeing people and they kind of grow from that. Other people I like just me and myself at home. Everyone's slightly different, aren't they? But there's common themes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the H in our Happy 365 thing is like you said, it's the foundations of a happy home, happy work office. Yeah. And if you don't have that, you're not going to have people who are able to work well. And I think the pandemic again, COVID showed us that, didn't it? When people were under extreme stress and worry from not knowing what was going to happen, the organisations that really thrived through that process were the ones that paid attention to their people first and their well-being, and they gave the right messaging around the fact that they would be secure and that they would be looked after, and they weren't going to just suddenly be cut from a job just because they were all sent home to work. So if you can pay attention to that and give them the tools that they need to look after their well-being, then you're going to have a stronger workforce in the long run.
So what do you think are the top points, the top issues that came out of the research?
Well, I think one of the top things was that there is less management focus on health and wellbeing compared to the first year of the pandemic. We're finding so there was a big focus on it during COVID because everybody was thrown into this sense of panic, really, wasn't it? Isn't really any other way of describing it? And then obviously we've gone back to a bit more of normality, whatever that means, and we've seen that actually there's been a bit of a drop in paying attention to employees' well-being for all sorts of reasons. Probably because people have just been in survival mode and trying to get business going again and trying to fumble around, trying to work out what's the right way to work. But we found that 7 in 10 of our respondents in the HR world agree that employees' wellbeing is on the senior leaders' agenda. Yeah. This is down from it would have been it was 70%. It's gone down from 75%. Yeah. So it's been a bit of a drop.
It's quite high. 70% is still good though, isn't it? But as you say, that's quite a big drop. It's 70 is good, but 5% seems in a year. Yeah. Since we last did it, seems a little bit of a. I kind of wouldn't have guessed that. I don't think. I wouldn't. I know it was a big talking point in the pandemic that people were, it was a big thing. Oh, you're all right at home, etc., etc. How are you coping? What about your family? Are they well, etc. But I feel like people still are worried. That's isn't that our experience? I think that people are still wanting stress.
Yeah, I think so. I wonder if that tiny little lull of 5% is what's contributing to, people submitting grievance and that sort of thing. Yeah,
you might be right. The kind of they felt very well supported and kind of looked after, and then there's a bit of that slip. Yeah, and then they're suddenly like, I'm not being looked after, and then it turns into they start pulling at all the niggles they've got, and that turns into a big old long grievance. That we've seen a few of those, as you say.
Yeah, exactly, definitely.
Yeah, and also we are definitely seeing there's a bit of a disconnect between what employers need and want from their employees and what employees want and need from an organisation around this kind of well-being piece of what's expected and what's the perception. Yeah. And I think that's where we've got to just slightly shift the conversation around it a bit, which is we've got to all get back to finding the right balance of work is work, and it's there to be a vehicle of our happiness, but it is not there to completely prop everybody up.
I think it has swapped to a prop. It was a swap to a prop, wasn't it? Yeah. And as you say, actually, the businesses need to kind of, as you say, come out of survival mode. They need to now progress. They need to start, moving on and doing well. And to do that, people need to kind of step up to the plate, which in turn can lead to grievances. Feel that there's a bit too much pressure on them, and in turn then leave them to grievances and then leave. Grievances don't often end very happily. They do tend to end with leaving. So and there was the presenteeism, wasn't there? That was the other stat that came. Yeah. One of the other stats that came out with it is that working while still. I think again that's an easier thing when everyone's working from home. Yeah. People tend more to kind of like try and keep on, going and try and do some work when they're actually perhaps not that well. I think that's your point as well. You said earlier about performance. I think it's so hard if you're not in the office and you're at home. It's much harder to prove. You kind of feel you have to do that extra. So when you work when you're ill, or you're always trying to prove yourself because you're not there in the office going. So I think that's been a common theme, is that people have been. What were the stats on it that?
Yeah, they're saying, so for those who are working at home,
Yeah.
presenteeism is 81% versus 61% for those working in the workplace.
Yeah.
Which shows you just how blurred it gets when you're at home, doesn't it? People feel like they probably should be doing more because they can't be seen.
Yeah.
And also you've got all the extra time that you have around not commuting, and also if you're not feeling 100%, you can probably work at home because you can manage it more than
you don't
having
have to
be in the
get
office.
dress up, get in the car. Yeah, so
Yeah.
you, as you say, you keep on just you're in your pajamas or whatever at the desk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one. So, but what was it? Yeah, 81% versus 65.
It's quite a big difference, isn't it?
That is a big difference.
And I think probably the key to that is like communication around it, isn't it? Around, again, coming back to like ways of working. How do we expect our people to work?
Yeah.
And what do they expect from us? So if you are, not feeling well for 5 days, do we expect you to be struggling through just because you could log on? And what's the perception from the employees feeling that they should do that if they're, just because they're not being seen?
Yeah.
It's quite a complicated
And I think
set of behaviours.
It's also that it's because you've got all the equipment at home. It used to be maybe you'd come into into work, everything would all be there, your computer, your laptop, etc. But now everyone's so mobile with the hybrid working, is that you've got everything at home. So it's almost like, yes, you're ill, but you have no excuse just to quickly check your email. So I do think that employees feel the pressure, and it's on their phones as well, isn't it? Feel the pressure to kind of do more work, even though they're actually not fully well. And I think, I don't know if this was out of the stats, but is a drop in the performance long term, isn't there, with this continue trying to work when you're actually not well enough.
Yeah.
It's actually detrimental to your performance and then in turn to the business. So actually it doesn't pay off
In the long run.
No, in the long run, really.
I think it's sort of setting people up to know that they can choose. They're all adults at the end of the day, and they should have the right to choose how they decide to work. So if you think you can manage, then great, get on with it. But if you feel like you're doing it because you should do it and actually you feel awful, why is that even happening?
Yeah.
What conversation are you not having with your employer to deal with that behaviour?
And that's the boundary thing again. So it's just that blurring of boundaries. Just everything is a lot trickier. There's lots of positives with the hybrid working, but then it's that blurring, isn't it, between home and work life that just doesn't. It's kind of disappeared, isn't it? The kind of differential.
So there's lots of challenges for our people, Microsoft partners, all companies out there at the moment, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess to summarise really on those, what we've talked about, the key things that we're noticing anyway are this idea around attracting and retaining people, and the awkward conversations that we have to have, and the kind of challenging the behaviours around maybe quietly disengaging. Is really important for people to pay attention to. It's easy stuff to maybe ignore in the short term, but actually in the long run, how can we help our clients deal with that? And then the other piece around noticing what organisation needs to do to support wellbeing. So how do they look at wellbeing as a big picture strategy, not just what you might think wellbeing is from a health point of view.
The big piece, as you say, is let's have a think what employees want, what benefits they want, not necessarily, they're not difficult fixes, but there's, you just put some thought, you just need to put some thought in what, and engage with your employees. I think that comes back to the quiet quitting, isn't it? If you don't engage with your employees and kind of communicate and have a two-way kind of understanding, you're never going to know what's going to really work for your workforce. Because, as I say, there's common themes, but it's slightly different in each place and what people want or not. And Microsoft partners, obviously, they're kind of a male-dominated workforce as well. So what might work in one company may not work so well in a Microsoft partner. You just got to kind of tailor. That's what I think. You need to tailor what each company needs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And tailor it to different departments and different types of work and different roles. And I think there's there's no one size fits all. I guess that's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. So there you have it. If you, our listeners or viewers, have any comments, thoughts, delights, surprises you'd like to share, then drop us an email, comment below. Thanks very much for listening and watching, and we hope to see you again.